The Just Baseball Show is live. Thank you to all of us joining us on Sports Grid, live on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Peter Appel, and that's Ryan Finkelstein, and we will discuss the 5 best offseasons so far in Major League Baseball. And at the end, we'll discuss the newest free agent signings, Harrison Bader to the Giants and Seranthony Dominguez to the White Sox. And it's all brought to you by BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBaseball when signing up, and you will get up to a $1,500 new player offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Just download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code JustBaseball. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. If that bet loses, you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Once you do, on top of the new player offer for any golf fans out there, the Farmers Insurance Open is this weekend. BetMGM players will receive a golf odds boost token. To use the token, add any golf wagers to your bet slip and activate the token. If you win your bet that was made with the odds boost token, you will receive extra winnings and unrestricted bonus dollars. And during the week, BetMGM players will receive an Any Sport Odds Boost token. To use the token, add a wager made up of bets from any sport to your bet slip and activate the token. If you win your wager that was made with the token, you will receive extra winnings and unrestricted bonus dollars. Again, that's code JustBaseball on BetMGM. Fink, let's get ready to talk about some of the best off seasons in Major League Baseball so far. And there have been a lot of good ones. A lot of bad ones that we talked about before we press the record button, but we're here to be positive. And I want to start with some honorable mentions. And that starts with the Pittsburgh Pirates. You get Brandon Lowe, Ryan O'Hearn, Jake Mangum, Gregory Soto, and Justickson Garcia, a.k.a. the Password. Our next honorable mention is the Kansas City Royals, who brought in Isaac Collins, Lane Thomas, Nick Mears, Matt Strahm, extended Salvador Perez and Michael Garcia, brought in Cam Meisner from the Rays, Mason Black from the Giants, and they extended their manager on a 3-year deal. And last but certainly not least in the honorable mentions category, the Atlanta Braves, who brought in Robert Suarez, Mauricio Dubon, Mike Yastrzemski, Ha-Seong Kim, and Rafael Iglesias. We'll get into our top 5 in the moment, but among those 3 teams, if you had to pick your favorite honorable mention for best offseason, where are you going?
I'm going to the Pirates just because for me, the Pirates are the team that has changed my perception of them maybe the most this offseason, in the sense that I've always just filed the Pirates away. Okay, they're not going to contend. This year, with adding 3 guys into their starting lineup, I kind of think with the pitching they already have and trying to give Paul Skeens a shot, that we might see Skeens pitch in a wild card game. And I think for the general baseball community, that's what we all want. So I like that the Pirates are active. I would love it if they cap this off by just spend a little bit crazy and fit Gino's bat in that lineup too. Why not? But I like what they did, especially for a team where our bar is just set so low for them that it's like, all right, wow, they made moves and we're not used to that.
I think they could also go make a trade for Alec Boehm as well. I would like for them to just add one more bat, because you're right. Unfortunately, the Pirates themselves have set the bar pretty low. But this offseason, you're bringing in a couple of bats, and that's all we asked from them. Bring in a couple of bats because we know how good the starting rotation is. For
Peter,
me,
one more bat. Sorry. What about you brought up Boehm? I'd even take Nick Castellanos on this team since they're going to do it for free. Stick Castellanos in right field. I don't care. Just get another guy that can hit the baseball. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there too.
For me, I really like what the Royals did, improving their outfield with Isaac Collins and Lane Thomas, improving their bullpen with Nick Mears and Matt Strahm, but also capitalizing on some extensions with their great manager, Matt Quatraro, and as well as Michael Garcia at third base, right? You extend Bobby Wood Jr. early and for good reason, and now that contract looks great. But also Michael Garcia is coming off a 5.5-win season, was one of the best dual threats, right? We're in the middle of the football season when we're talking about defense and offense. I thought the Royals have crushed it so far, and the good thing is the offseason isn't over yet. I still think the Braves had a good offseason, but if I were to choose, I would go with the Kansas City Royals. But now breaking into the top 5, I think it's pretty easy to just go with the LA Dodgers. Now, this isn't in order, So we aren't saying that the Dodgers have had the best offseason of any team so far. We're really just going through the 5 best. But when you sign the best available free agent to a 4-year deal, when we know that the Dodgers signing these big AAV deals is actually better for them than these long-term, and to get him on only a 4-year deal where you're getting him in his prime from ages 28 to 31, like those key years. And then on top of it, they're able to bring in the best reliever on the market in Edwin Diaz, who is arguably the best closer in Major League Baseball. And then on top of it, they add a good bench bat in Andy Ibanez. It's funny, when you're going over the Dodgers offseason, Kyle Tucker, Edwin Diaz, and Andy Ibanez. Damn right, Andy Ibanez. He's going to help on the bench. But when you bring in Tucker, you bring in Diaz, you're going to be on this list.
Yeah, and I'm just realizing now they also brought back Miggy Rowe. So they brought back little postseason hero. I think if going into the offseason, if we had to say, all right, what are the Dodgers' needs if they have any needs? Because really, they could have done nothing and still won the World Series this upcoming season. But we would have said, okay, the back end of their bullpen maybe needs some help. Maybe they should get an outfielder. And they just said, you know what? We'll take the best outfielder on the board. We'll take the best reliever on the board, and we'll just make our team that much better. To me, it is a quiet offseason compared to some things they've done in the past as far as the volume of moves. When you don't need a lot, they just shot for the stars on the few moves that they made, and they got a couple of the best players available. So yes, the Dodgers are just that much better.
And I don't think they're just on this list because they signed a couple of big free agents. I thought they also addressed needs.
Yeah, 100%.
Believe it or not, the Dodgers had needs. I thought they needed to address their outfield. And who did they get? Kyle Tucker. What was the Dodgers' biggest problem in the playoffs and even in the regular season? Was their bullpen. Now they don't have to rely on Tanner Scott as their closer. You bring in Edwin Diaz. I guess you're demoting Tanner Scott to the 8th inning role. We can't forget he's been one of the best relievers in baseball up until last year. But now you have a sense of comfortability in that bullpen where you're not relying on Tanner Scott to get the 3 hardest outs in baseball. You can go Edwin Diaz, and even that combo, the short arm slot from Tanner Scott to a similar arm slot for Edwin Diaz, that's just going to be so tough for batters to pick up. They address needs and they spent money, but not even a huge amount of money this offseason. And of course, everybody's talking about how they're ruining baseball. Of course they are.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the Dodgers, they are operating within the rules, and they just operate within those rules better than anybody else. And like you just mentioned on the screen here, you're looking at the tax payroll. Last year was actually a little bit more in their tax payroll this year, 417 to 413, which means, Peter, I mean, do we jump into Dodgers GM? We got $4 million to spend. Why not? No, I mean, they don't need anything else, but it's just crazy that this team is less expensive after giving Kyle Tucker $60 million a year or $57 million when it comes to present day value. It's crazy.
And we got about a minute and 40 seconds left. I think an absolute disaster for the rest of baseball. For the Dodgers, this would be otherworldly phenomenal if they were actually able to make the move to trade for Tarek Skubal. Because, of course, it's kind of a pipe dream right now, but we've had Buster Olney on our show, and he has kind of indicated that the Tigers might be willing to move him if they are overblown with a deal, and the Dodgers are in that unique position where they can completely overpay for a pitcher like Tarek Skubal. But GM Andrew Friedman did come out and say, we don't think that we're going to be adding big-time starting pitchers right now. And you look at the rotation, they don't need to. We have about a minute left. I'm curious if you think the Dodgers need to do anything else, which I know is not the best question in the world, but that won't stop them from doing other moves.
They don't need to do anything else. And obviously the Skubal thing is, well, we'll just see how that all resolves itself. My only question is, what happens to Kike? He's still out there. Are they going to wait and let him go somewhere else and then they pick up? I mean, I still have Kike penciled in to what, the 6th spot in the lineup for the World Series. Like, you still think Kike is going to be there, right? Some way, somehow.
Yeah, Kike Hernandez, I did tweet out earlier when they made the move for Kyle Tucker. I said, no matter what happens, Kike Hernandez is going to be in that playoff lineup because there's just no way the Dodgers don't bring him back. And Dodger fans were already like, yep, of course, he's going to be one of the outfielders. So I guess we're moving somebody else away. But we will continue here on the Just Baseball Show with the best off seasons in baseball right after this. Next up on our best off seasons list is the Baltimore Orioles, headlined by the signing of Pete Alonso. They also traded for right-handed pitcher Shane Baz. You bring in even more power with Taylor Ward, but you did have to part with Grayson Rodriguez. You shore up the bullpen with arms like Ryan Helsley, who needs to bounce back after a rough showing with the New York Mets, but still over the last couple of seasons, he has been one of the best closers in Major League Baseball. And you also shore up the bullpen by bringing in Andrew Kittredge, who holds appreciators know is one of my favorites. Nobody locks down a seventh inning like Andrew Kittredge. And bringing back Zach Eflin. They have already had a really good offseason, and I want to focus on the offseason that they've had. But I'm sure the cherry on top of the sundae for Orioles fans would be bringing in Framber Valdez on top of the moves that they've already made. But before we even talk about Framber potentially going to the Orioles, because it seems that's the consensus right now, let's talk about the moves that they have already made. They've addressed a lot of the issues that they had to address going into the offseason.
They did. I'm really curious as someone that's watched Pete Alonso's whole career, what Pete looks like on a new team, where I almost feel like even though Pete was with the Mets for all that time and had a little bit of a leadership role, I think that's going to be notching it up even more with the Orioles going into that team as the big offseason acquisition, the guy that can bat cleanup and just rack up the RBIs. I think Pete's going to make a huge difference on that team. And I think with Pete there, it might take some of the pressure off a Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman. And maybe we see better performances from those guys after a year where both of them, certainly Adley, but even Gunnar, had a bit of a down year from what we have come to expect. I think those guys might end up being still the best players on the team, but I think Pete Alonso kind of gets more out of all these younger guys that don't have to do as much, because there's this guy that's been a big star in Major League Baseball for a long time that they can kind of defer to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think bringing in Taylor Ward is pretty underrated. At
Yeah.
the time, I wasn't a fan really of the trade, and I still am not. But that doesn't mean that the offense didn't get better with Taylor Ward coming off 30 plus home runs. And the Orioles, right? We talk about their pitching and how needed a starting pitcher would be. I even see a comment right here. Thank you to everybody joining us live on YouTube that the Orioles need a starting pitcher. That offense needed to be addressed too. So bringing in Pete Alonso is great. But if they hadn't have brought in Taylor Ward, I would also be screaming that they need to do more offensively. But bringing him in, that big right-handed bat as well. We can't forget this Orioles offense finished 24th in batting average last year, 24th in on-base percentage, and 21st in OPS. We're expecting bounce backs from guys like Gunnar Henderson, guys like Adley Rutschman. Gunnar Henderson, not really a bounce back candidate, but we just know that there is more in the tank than what he showed last season. But Mike Elias, the GM of the Orioles, have set the Orioles up to have a much better team in 2026. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. So in a vacuum, I didn't love the trade, but I still do love the addition of Taylor Ward, all things considered.
Yeah, I could say maybe you don't love the trade, but we love their lineup right now. I think that's it's clear. They don't have to address this lineup any further. I think they made the two big additions they needed. They're in a good spot, but the pitching side of things, it's interesting because I actually think Helsley is going to be fine. I think he'll settle in, and I think for one, you have the combination of leaving the only team you'd ever been with the Cardinals, but you also had going to a big market with the Mets. There was a lot of pressure on it. This is a lot different going to a new team from the beginning. You have all spring training to get acclimated. I think Helsley will be, if not as elite as we've seen him in the past, he'll be a serviceable closer for sure. To me, the question is, how good is Shane Baz? And that's where you get to sort of the elephant in the room of this discussion. Whereas if they go out right now and they complete this offseason by picking up Framber, we're not ranking, but we might all of a sudden shoot the Orioles to the top of this list as having the best offseason of any team. That's how important I think that acquisition is. If they end up just settling on, I don't know, Chris Bassett or Jose Quintana, to me, they're the only team that's been linked to Framber. So now I feel like it's almost setting things up where if they don't get him, it's going to be a big disappointment. you slide him into the top of that rotation, and it just takes so much pressure off of everybody else because if nothing else, Framber's going to give you 180 innings. It's going to give you a chance to win most of the time that it takes them out.
Because the Orioles, I totally agree with what you just said. They're entering into, the key years of guys like Gunnar and Adley Rutschman and Jackson Holiday, hopefully taking that next step. Now is the time to go fully in. And I think a good part about signing Framber is I don't think he's going to be crazy expensive.
Oh.
And a big reason why is the incident during the regular season last year with the switch up with his catcher. And he had to create that 20-minute video basically telling general managers and front office members that he is a good guy and trying to change the narrative about him, because I could understand how we would feel if one incident doesn't tell the full story, albeit it definitely wasn't great. But as we go further along in the offseason, his offers might be dwindling, so the Orioles are in a good position. What type of contract do you think Framber will sign?
So I think it's one of two. It's either a shorter term high AAV deal, but because we're talking about Framber to the Orioles, I almost think it might be a longer term deal at an AAV that's lower than we expected. And maybe there's still an opt out that allows him to, test his market after 2 years or something like that, so he can maybe try to get a better deal down the line. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Framber ends up checking in below Ranger Suarez in terms of average annual value. Maybe he gets a 6th year, but who knows? It could be 6 years at 24 million per instead of what Ranger got at 26 per over 5 years. I just think that the Orioles right now have all the leverage, and it's just a matter of if another team steps up. And I don't know what team that is, because all offseason we've heard Mets and Orioles. The Mets aren't doing it now. So it seems like the Orioles are standing out on an island by themselves, and they just got to find a way to get this thing done.
We have about a minute left. If you were Framber's agent, would you tell him to go for one of these short-term high AAV deals with opt-outs, or would you suggest, I think now is the time to sign a 5 or 6 year deal?
I think the perfect case scenario is try to get a 5 or 6 year deal where maybe he gets like 50 million in the first 2 years and get an opt-out after year 2. Next year's class is super deep in free agency. I don't think you want to be part of that class with Skubal, and we'll see about Peralta if he gets extended or not, but there's a lot of arms that could be free agents. So I would say opt out after year 2 and year 3 to try to test it again. But at this point, just lock in the long-term deal, and I'd just be pushing for that opt-out to really, give you that chance to reset if you pitch really well the next couple seasons.
And whatever contract the Orioles decide to give him, I kind of think it's going to be a good move, because I think it's going to be a long-term deal, but discounted, or a short-term high AAV deal. So we're going to continue with the best off seasons here on the Just Baseball Show right after this. Next up on the best off seasons list, we're looking at the Boston Red Sox. Now, just to recap who they brought in, we're talking about Sonny Gray, Wilson Contreras. Wilson Contreras. I was almost about to confuse him with his brother, William Contreras. Ranger Suarez and Yohan Oviedo. Now, we all saw the graphics late into the offseason, how the Red Sox were the one team that didn't bring in a free agent. They finally did, but it's clear that Craig Breslow the GM of the Red Sox, Craig Breslow, wants to operate through trades, which makes sense. Kind of. I want the Red Sox to spend. Their fans should want the front office to spend. But these moves in a vacuum, I really like bringing in Sonny Gray. I really like bringing in Contreras at first base. They actually did sign a big free agent in Ranger Suarez. And I said, as soon as they signed him, that I love that fit. He is cold-blooded, and you need to be cold-blooded if you are going to succeed at Fenway Park in the matchups in the AL East. And while he doesn't throw 95 miles an hour, it's more 90 miles an hour. I've seen him carve through plenty of elite lineups, keeping guys off balance. So overall, I thought it was a really solid offseason. Am I still wanting more? A little bit, but it still cracks our top 5.
I like this comment here, and I want to build off faces. I disagree mainly because I think they should have spent the Ranger money on a bat. to me, this is where they're a move away from completing this offseason, and it's turning the now pitching surplus they have into that bat. So to me, they're still a trade away from finishing this offseason. What that trade is, who knows? Maybe it's picking up Isaac Paredes. That's like the most seamless fit. But the thing is, their rotation's in a great spot now. We can all agree that having Ranger as your 2, Sonny Gray as your 3, with, of course, Garrett Crochet as your ace, that's a 1 through 3 we can all get behind. Johan Oviedo gives them more depth. I just think they have so much starting pitching depth now with Peyton Tolley coming along, Connolly early. It's like they need to make one more move. They need to make a big trade, get a bat, and then this offseason's complete. Wilson Contreras for Alex Bregman, I don't know if you consider that an even swap as far as offensively, but it still feels like they need one more move. It's still one of the best off seasons we've gotten, but I think that's almost it's almost like a testament to the rest of the league and how so few teams have been active at the Red Sox crack this list because they're just missing that last piece for me.
I want to bring in Isaac Paredes. I think he'd be a perfect fit on the Red Sox. He could play third base. He would hit a bunch of doubles off that green monster. He would also hit a bunch of home runs over the green monster. The thing is, I don't want to include a bat on the big league roster. I don't want it to be a Jarren Duran for Paredes trade centered around Paredes and others, but we have to give up Duran. I don't want to trade from this outfield in order to get said bat. So I think it'll be on Craig Breslow to figure out a way to bring in a Brendan Donovan and Isaac Paredes, one of these guys, without trading from the outfield surplus. Because, of course, it's a problem in theory right now because where are you going to place them? But it's a great problem to have. You never know what's going to happen with injuries. I would greatly prefer the Red Sox do not trade from their big league talent right now. This is when they should be trading prospects in order to get bats to truly compete in the American League East this season.
See, I don't think at this, we've talked a long time about the Jarren Duran possibility. You can't trade Duran because right now you look at this lineup, there's a lot of potential, but I mean, where would we even stack up Jarren Duran in this Red Sox lineup? Like, I know Roman Anthony is supposed to be the best hitter next season, but Jarren Duran, if I had to just bet on a guy to have the best WRC plus, like he's pretty high up on the list of this current Red Sox lineup. So you're right. They have to keep these guys. They have to keep the outfielders. It has to be a trade from that starting pitching surplus. Maybe it's Brian Bayo that gets traded. Who knows? There's been some kind of rumblings about that, but they got to trade an arm to get a bat for this offseason to make sense because, like that commenter said, the Ranger Suarez money was theoretically supposed to go to a bat. I think they were smart realizing they weren't going to get Bo Bichette. So spend the money on the free agent you like the most. I'm okay with that strategy. But then now you got to take this starting pitching surplus and turn it into an upgrade for this lineup because otherwise I just think it's a team that doesn't fully fit. They just need one more move.
I agree. I think they need one more move. And I just don't know exactly what that move is. Among all of the players that we've talked about so far, who would be your number one choice? Is it Paredes? Is it a trade for Donovan? Is it calling up the Cubs and begging for Nico Horner, even though they're probably not going to trade him? What's that one move that you want more than anything?
It's Paredes because I want to see him hit 60 doubles off the monster. And also because the Astros still need pitching. I know they've picked up Mike Burrows. So they've done some things to address that rotation, but they need depth and the Red Sox can provide them depth. And they don't need Paredes anymore. They have plenty of infielders in Houston after they picked up Correa. So it's the most seamless trade, I would think, but it hasn't gotten done yet. So we're still waiting to see if these teams can line up. But to me, that's the most obvious fit left here. Other than that, I don't know where the impact bat truly is.
It hasn't gotten done yet. Let us know in the YouTube comments as we're live here on YouTube. What move do you want to see the Red Sox make to finalize this offseason? We'll continue with best off seasons here on the Just Baseball Show right after this. We continue on here on the best off seasons on the Just Baseball Show. Thank you to everybody joining us live on YouTube. The best way to support, smash that like button and make sure to subscribe and keep the comments flowing. And to all this joining us on Sports Grid, thank you for watching. And of course, listening on audio, the best way to support there, leave a 5-star review if you are enjoying the content so far. We continue best off seasons. People see it live here on YouTube. We see the flag in Ryan's background. It's the New York Mets. And how could it not be the New York Mets? Now, 2 weeks ago, Mets fans were concerned, and I understood. But Ryan here said, pump the brakes. Let Stearns cook. And that's exactly what he did. Bringing in Bo Bichette, bringing in Freddie Peralta, signing Devin Williams, signing Jorge Polanco, trading for Luis Robert. He brought in Luis Robert, Freddie Peralta, and Bo Bichette in a matter of 5 days. But he also traded away Brandon Nimmo for Marcus Semien, brought in Luke Weaver in the bullpen. And Ryan, make sure I don't forget every time, they also brought in Luis Garcia. They brought in Luis Garcia. I haven't even asked you this question yet. What's your favorite move that the Mets have made so far? Because now you have a Rolodex of options. You know you needed a starter, but you also needed a bat. You needed to improve the bullpen. You've filled a lot of needs. But what is your personal favorite so far?
I had to include Luis Garcia because it's my no. For me, I think my favorite move, it's tough. I would say the Freddie Peralta move was the one that I think this team needed the most and really just put a stamp on this offseason. The one that I'm most excited to see play out is Bo Bichette. Like I can't, that's the one for me that allowed Mets fans to sort of turn the page on Pete Alonso and all of the talk about, moving on from the past core and the fans that were upset about that. Once you got Bo Bichette, it's like, oh, okay. Now this lineup looks a lot of fun. It looks like a team that fans can get behind. And yeah, that 1 through 3 of Lindor, Soto, Bichette, that's what I'm looking forward to watching the most. I'm totally on board with the contract where he is so incentivized to have a monster season and prove he can play third base, because if he can do that, if Bo Bichette just repeats his offensive season and has 0 outs above average at third base, just proves that he can play the position, he is going to make so much money in free agency next year as the best bat available. And so I just like the bet on guys who have something to play for too. Bo Bichette, Luis Robert. These are guys who are in their physical prime, who are playing for their next deal. I really like the upside that the Mets have added this offseason, and they've gotten a hell of a lot better defensively too.
I want to stick on Bo Bichette. Also, good comment here. Don't forget about Craig Kimbrell signed to a minor league deal. But I want to stick on Bichette for a second, because Stearns came out this offseason and said that run prevention was going to be very important. And when he made the trade for Marcus Semien, trading away Brandon Nimmo, who I think we both can agree right now is the better bat, but Semien is the better defender, you thought you're buying into, a run prevention based offseason. Luis Robert, I think, answers that exact question as well. Bo Bichette doesn't, because his first year playing third base, and one of the concerns for Bichette defensively is his arm. It's not a very good arm over there. And now you're moving him over to third base. So the more you've sat with it, the more you've dove into Bo Bichette's profile. How do you think he adjusts to year one at third base? Because I think of Alex Rodriguez moving over to third base when the Yankees brought him in. Of course, he's not going to play shortstop because you got Jeter there. And he was one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball. And he even had growing pains in his first season. So how do you think Bichette will be in year one?
So I think for me, the context is important, because the Mets, they were trying to get Kyle Tucker. And defensively, that would have been a much more seamless fit and would have led into the run prevention. Having Kyle Tucker in the outfield, you keep Brett Beatty at third, it would have been a better defensive team. But when you couldn't get Tucker, you needed the bat. So yes, that was a signing where it turned into more about run production than run prevention. But still, it's going to be an easier position for him to play at third than short. I think if you think about those plays in the hole that Bo Bichette had to make, that's a longer throw than the throw from third base. So I think I'm not as worried about it. I don't think he has to be outstanding for the Mets defense to be better. Remember, there was a lot of games last year, in the last couple of years, where Mark Vientos was over at third base, and that is a low bar for Bo Bichette to get over. So I think overall, yes, is that potentially an issue? I think the Mets have some concerns in their corner infield spots, and obviously there's the Juan Soto, part of right field that's always going to kind of ding your defense. But I think run prevention wise, having Simeon at second and Luis Robert in center, you got better up the middle. And having Carson Bench in left, which is eventually what's going to happen, even if he doesn't break camp, that's going to be a significant upgrade defensively over Brandon Nimmo. So I think overall they got better defensively. At third base and first base, they had to just get the best bat that they could. But both with Jorge Polanco and Bo Bichette, you have former shortstops. And I do think that David Stearns kind of likes the range that those guys have at those positions. And I think it's going to be all right. But yeah, it couldn't be a run prevention move at every spot because you still had to replace all that run production that you were losing by 100%. Moving off of Alonso.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I was going to ask you the same question about Jorge Polanco, but I think you already answered it, right? Not every move can be the best defensive player ever. And luckily, they still have Mark Vientos there who could potentially slot in and play some first base if Polanco is really struggling that bad. You're really bringing in these two guys for their bats, and the rest of the team, you hope, is improved defensively. And from the looks of it, they are. I really want to also ask you about the bullpen because we've talked about Bichette plenty. We've talked about Freddie Peralta. We've talked about run prevention at length now, but we haven't really mentioned them bringing in Devin Williams and Luke Weaver. And I think a lot of people looked at Devin Williams and said that ERA isn't real. You look at a lot of the underlying metrics, and it was still a very similar Devin Williams to have been what has been one of the better relievers in baseball. And Luke Weaver has had two really, really solid seasons with the Yankees. That bullpen, again, we are not forgetting about Luis Garcia and even bringing in Tobias Myers. It looks like a much better unit than it was last year, even though they lost Edwin Diaz.
I think it is. I think if nothing else, they're at least where they were as far as if you look at Devin Williams and Luke Weaver trying to replace the end of season production of Edwin Diaz and Tyler Rogers, I think it's close. And then they've made these other additions like Luis Garcia, and we'll see if Craig Kimbrell can crack the bullpen. I think Tobias Myers, I expect to be part of that bullpen because I don't think the Mets want to necessarily burn his last option. And I just think he's perfect in a long man role. So I think they've done a good job of getting their bullpen close to where it was last year, if not the same, maybe slightly better if Devin Williams can get back to the best that we know that we've seen from him in the past. I do think if they were to find a way to make one more reliever addition, it would really put this team over the top. I just struggle to find that free agent, and then you're talking about the trade market, and it's tough to pull off one of those trades. I pitched something on my show today where maybe the Mets, because there's more free agent starting pitchers, could trade David Peterson for a reliever and then backfill that spot through free agency. But they also don't have to do that. Like this team right now is in very good shape, and bullpen is the thing that can evolve the most throughout the season because you never know who's going to come up from AAA and all of a sudden you have a lights out arm. Like the Mets have a guy, Dylan Ross, who they're really high on, who cracked the 40-man at the end of last season. So I think it's fine, but that would be the one thing that would make them just a little bit better.
I like this comment here from Uncle Ted. I would absolutely call up the Colorado Rockies and try and go get Victor Vodnik. And for anybody listening who doesn't know that name, go on YouTube and just search his highlights. He is throwing absolute fuel. And we know this. Sometimes you pluck a reliever out of Colorado and they end up being much better on a team like the New York Mets. We have about 55 seconds left. You talked about you want one more move in the bullpen potentially. Do you think this starting rotation is done?
Yeah, I think so. You look at this rotation now, you got Peralta and McClain as your 1 and 2. I love Peterson and Holmes as your middle of the rotation guys. And now you're 5 and 6. Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga were supposed to be the front line of your rotation last year. And you just got those guys that you're hoping for bounce backs. You have Jonah Tong, you have Christian Scott. So they have some depth that's going to start in Syracuse. I think this rotation is totally fine. And we mentioned Tobias Myers. I'm sure he'll stretch out in spring training, and if there's injuries, he can slide right into that rotation. I do not see them making another move unless they do something like I described of turning Peterson into a top reliever and then backfilling that spot. But they right now, as presently constructed, they don't have to touch that rotation.
And that's a good thing. And the Mets have had a great offseason so far, but we are not done yet. Let's keep going. Next up on best off seasons, last but certainly not least, is the Toronto Blue Jays. They made big splashes early, signing Dylan Cease to a $200+ million deal to headline their rotation. They also brought in Cody Ponce on a 3-year deal coming over from the KBO, who took major strides, won basically all the awards over there, and now throws fuel. We remember him. He kind of came up with the Pirates, struggled a little bit, goes over to the MPB, then goes over to the KBO, absolutely dominates. I think it's a great upside play for Toronto. They also brought in Tyler Rogers into their bullpen, the submariner who just gets outs every single year and probably will continue for at least the 3 years on his deal. They also brought in Kazuma Okamoto from the MPB, big-time power hitter, but he's not a guy like Murakami who's only known for the power, a really well-rounded bat. And we also wrote down brainwashing Shane Bieber to not opt out. That's a good point that I think that you gave us. We were all surprised that he opted back in with the Blue Jays, but it's understandable because he still is returning from injury. And that's really just a testament to the Blue Jays training staff, where he thought, let me take the 20-ish million on only a 1-year deal, even though I think I could get a multi-year deal because of how comfortable he feels with Toronto. Like, if I'm a Blue Jays fan, that makes me feel really good about my team. Not only are you bringing back Shane Bieber, getting him to opt into a contract, but also knowing that a pitcher of that caliber is willing to opt in because of what we have in-house.
For one, shout out to Peyton for actually putting it on the graphic, because I was just joking on our notes, and I'm glad that he threw it on there, because look, it's one of the worst financial decisions a player has made in a long time, because Shane Bieber had a $4 million buyout on his player option. So he's making $16 million. He basically just had a top 1 year, $12 million in free agency to beat that deal. And I'm telling you, he would have far surpassed that. I think in this market with no qualifying offer attached, Shane Bieber could have gotten, I think, a 9-figure deal. I honestly think that there would have been a team that would have just stepped up and said, you know what? We saw him pitch well in the postseason. He's going to be full year off of TJ. Let's just do it. Shout out to the Blue Jays for really making it a great place to play, and for Bieber wanting to run it back. But it's one of the best moves in the offseason. They didn't do anything. It was just Shane Bieber calling up like, yeah, I'm going to take the player option. They were probably like, what? Really? Okay. Thank you very much. But here's the thing about the Blue Jays offseason. Pitching, I think they get an A+. Dylan Cease, Cody Ponce, you keep Bieber, you get Tyler Rogers. I'm a little bit not concerned about the lineup because it's still great, but I'm a little underwhelmed by Kazuma Okamoto replacing Bo Bichette, and that's sort of it for their offseason offensively. Maybe they didn't have to do anything more, but when the expectation was set at Kyle Tucker, it now, in retrospect, feels a little underwhelming. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think the reason they did that was, what was their biggest hole? I think it was pitching. And what did they spend all of their money on? Pitching. So you have to take a step back in other areas. And that's what they did with the offense. We saw how good it was in the playoffs. It was one of the best offenses in the regular season. And you still look at the current lineup and it's still really good. So I'm sure they kind of came to a conclusion where, all right, we're going to have to take the foot off the gas a little bit when it comes to our offense, but we can afford to do so because of how good it is. Let's shore up the pitching staff with a headliner like Dylan Cease, bringing in Cody Ponce, getting another good bullpen arm. But yes, in a vacuum, going from Bo Bichette to Okamoto is a downgrade, but they've upgraded in every other area. And now they look like a more well-rounded team than they did last year, albeit the offense isn't quite as good, but it's still potent. I mean, Podcast Pete, can you flash up their lineup again? For all those watching us on YouTube and live here on Sports Grid, especially if Anthony Santander can give them the power that was promised when he signed, the 9-figure deal with them. And we saw he was one of the better power hitters with the Orioles, and he didn't give them basically anything last year. Now, George Springer's a big X factor, of course. Can he replicate what he did last year? But he made a swing change in spring training. I was listening to an interview with the Blue Jays hitting coach, and it really all clicked for him. I know it sounds weird for a 35, 36-year-old to find a swing change to help him, but that happened, and he was able to unlock even more power and just become a complete hitter, hitting over 300. I love Addison Barger. Vladdy is as good as it gets. Varsho wasn't healthy all year, last year too. So I'm sure they're looking at a couple of guys who are injured to kind of replicate what they had with Bichette, and they feel like Okamoto can still be a really solid contributor in the lineup. So I totally understand where they were coming from, and I love the Blue Jays offseason.
Yeah, like I said, for me, overall, I love their offseason. Their pitching is great. And I do think that, I guess for me, it's just not getting the Tucker thing done. And, the Dodgers stepped up with a huge offer. But one of the other things that kind of came out after the fact was they set a line in the sand of Kyle Tucker can't get paid more than Vladdy. And I just wonder how you think that's something that Vladdy would have, you think Vladdy cares if Tucker was getting paid more? Would he rather have Kyle Tucker as his teammate? I think the Yankees did the same thing when it came to pursuing Yoshinobu Yamamoto, where he couldn't make more than Garrett Cole. I just, sometimes teams kind of lock themselves, and I think it's an excuse to not go a little bit further. But if they went to 400 for Tucker, they might have landed Tucker earlier in the offseason, never signed Okamoto, Barger's still at third, and it's an overwhelming favorite in the American League. I just think that now they're not quite as much of a favorite as they could have been, but they still did a great job. And when we rank teams going to the season, they very well could still be our top ranked American League team, probably will be. So I'm not trying to be too hard on them.
And to be fair to them, yes, is getting Kyle Tucker instead of Okamoto better?
Of course.
Yeah, but it's $320 million more. And now their owners, Rogers Communications, they have plenty of money. I'm sure they could do it if they wanted to, but I'm sure they didn't say, all right, our offense is going to be top 5 this season. With Tucker, it'll be top 3, and all it costs is $300 million more. I'm sure they felt to themselves, hey, we're still really, really good, and we don't even need to sign Kyle Tucker. But credit to them, they still offered Kyle Tucker a 10-year, $350 million deal. I think going up to 400 sounds nice, but it doesn't mean like it's automatic that you would even get him, especially when he's making $60 million a year with the Dodgers. But we have about 35 seconds left. Is there anything else that the Blue Jays need to do here? I don't think they do.
It's funny that I'm criticizing them, and I'm also going to say, no, they're done.
Yeah.
I'm being a little, I'm nitpicking, but ultimately their roster is set. They have a great team, and it was a very good offseason for them.
It was an extremely good offseason. Blue Jays fans, I know, are very, very happy. So those are our 5 best off seasons. We're looking at the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Orioles, the Mets, and the Blue Jays. Now we're going to dip into some new MLB free agent signings right after this. Couple of fun free agent signings. Harrison Bader signed a 2-year deal worth $20.5 million with the San Francisco Giants. And over the weekend, Seranthony Dominguez signed a 2-year, $20 million deal with the Chicago White Sox. I want to start with Harrison Bader because I think the Giants really addressed a need here. When you look at them defensively last year, their defensive ranks in 2025 from the center field position, they ranked 30th in defensive runs saved, -18. In outs above average, they ranked 29th with -4. And in fielding run value, 28th at -2. Harrison Bader in center field in 2025 across 81 games, +6 in defensive runs saved, +3 in outs above average, and +2 in fielding run value. Jung-Hoo Lee, who played a lot of center field last year for the Giants, has an incredible arm, but finished with -11 outs above average. The range just really isn't there. And then in left field, Heliot Ramos, with all due respect, Ramos, you can rake, but we need you to improve defensively. Just by the eye test, he looked like one of the worst defenders in baseball last year, and the numbers certainly agreed with that. So they needed a guy in center who could be locked down defensively, and Harrison Bader still does that, while also providing more offense for a team who needs more offense. I thought it was an absolute no-brainer signing for them, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of frustrated with myself that we didn't see this coming sooner because it's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that you should expect that Harrison Bader is going to replicate the offensive season that he had last year in San Francisco. I think you're kind of setting yourself up as a Giants fan if you are hoping for that, just because it's a much tougher ballpark to hit in, certainly from where he finished last season in Philly than going to San Francisco. But like you mentioned, this is as much about the glove as anything else. And if he can still replicate some of the things we saw last year, getting on base more, hitting for a high average, I don't know if the power is going to quite be where it was. I think he had like 17 or 18 home runs last year. I would almost bet that it might even end up being like below 15, but he could still run a 115 WRC plus with great defense and center. And it's exactly what this team needed. So I think it's a really solid signing. The one thing I don't know if we would stay on the Giants or not, but to me, I look at this signing and I'm now revisiting Adolis Garcia going back to the Phillies for about the same money, 1-year deal instead of 2. I just feel like the Phillies kind of mismanaged the Harrison Bader, pursuit. It seemed like they never even tried. And I feel like they would be a much better team if they had Bader instead of Garcia for the upcoming season.
You can't help yourself from giving a trade to the Phillies.
I'm just saying. I mean, am I wrong?
True. No, you're not wrong at all. No, looking back, it's like Bader got $20 million over 2 years. Okay, yeah. You're locking him to 2 years instead of 1 year with Adolis Garcia. And now Adolis has a ton of upside still. But I feel better bringing in Bader, especially due to the defense. Like, that's one thing about Adolis Garcia is that the defense has completely fallen off. He was one of the better defensive right fielders in baseball with tons of power. The power started to go down, and the defense went way out of here. So it's a lottery ticket for a Phillies team that's getting older when I feel like you really have to solidify the core now, and they didn't really, but the Giants certainly did, bringing on Harrison Bader. It's a perfect fit there, and I'm curious if the Giants are going to do any more this offseason. But let's end right now with Seranthony Dominguez signing with the Chicago White Sox, right? 2-year deal worth $20 million, $10 million a year. Dominguez had a 3.16 ERA and 79 strikeouts across 62 2/3 in 2025. I swore Dominguez was going to sign with a contender. There are plenty of contenders out there who still need legit bullpen arms, and he's clearly the best arm left on the market. But the White Sox came out and said, we're going to reinvest the Luis Robert money. And they do immediately by bringing this guy in. If the White Sox are able to compete, he'll be locking down the 9th inning most likely. Maybe you move Grant Taylor into the rotation. I know White Sox fans want to see what that looks like, and maybe that awards them an opportunity to do so. Or the White Sox do not have a good season. I think he'd be a pretty good flip candidate. So I think all in all, I like this move by the White Sox. I just like the pitcher. And I thought money-wise, it's not too bad. Did he get a little bit more than I thought? Maybe. I projected him 2 years, $18 million. So if you needed to give him $22 million extra, one more a year, fine by me.
Yeah, I'm surprised with this one just because I don't know why there wasn't a contender, like you said, that stepped up at that price. And it's either one of two things. Either nobody did, maybe nobody wanted to give him a second year, or maybe he wanted a chance to close games and he's going to get the opportunity to do that in Chicago. So great signing for them. I think it's a really good way to reallocate that money. It's going to be a lot easier for them to flip Seranthony Dominguez at the deadline than it probably would have been to trade Luis Robert. And it's half the money. I mean, you basically actually allocated, 1 year of Robert across 2 years for Dominguez. So really good signing by the White Sox.
I agree. And that'll do it here on the Just Baseball Show. Again, thank you to everybody joining us on Sports Grid. Thank you to everybody joining us live here on YouTube. Make sure to bang that subscribe button and hit the like button if you enjoyed the live streams. And of course, if you're listening on audio, remember to rate and review 5 stars. And if you'd be so kind as to leave a written review as well. And if you want to join the best baseball group chat in the world, you can find the link in the episode description. For Ryan, I'm Peter. Have a great Monday. And with that, thank you, everybody.